Hello and welcome to episode 112 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me, as usual, is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm grand, thank you. Before we go anywhere, let's talk Element Games. What's out? What's coming out next week? We got that Loon Curse stuff. I see a lot of people using the Sylvaneth for demons for 30k, and there's you can get it's half demons, half goblins on squigs. But there's some cool stuff coming from that, and loads of other stuff. Plenty of things.
What's the name? Slanesh, Great Demon Slanesh should be Keeper of Secrets should be coming out soon as well. I think I've seen how they pre-release a few of those to people to paint up. I've seen a couple of pop up on Instagram, so that usually denotes that they've handed them out and they're going to be up for pre-order.
You mean all the stuff that's up for pre-order currently?
Oh, is that? I didn't know if it was out yet.
You're very with it, Neil. All the Slanesh stuff will be out the coming Saturday. So whatever Saturday that is, the 4th, I think. So yeah, you can still jump on there. Maybe if you're listening to this as soon as it comes out, it's a little bit late. I do apologise for that. But yeah, all that Sylvaneth goodness, all that Slanesh goodness, should I say? A few books and stuff out as well. Don't forget that if you like Black Library, you can get quite a few of the books from Element as well. You can chuck your White Dwarf on with the order if you want. We have got some. We've got some Titanicus. Well, Doom and Wallet came out, didn't we? Oh no, the weapons were resin. So yeah, there's all the usual stuff. There's whatever you need to hobby. Element's pretty much got it all covered. And the best bit is if you order on that pre-release weekend, you get 20% off rather than 15%. And usually the pre-release stuff arrives on that Saturday. Well, has done for me most of the time anyway. So that's always good. I do also want to mention Versatile Terrain. We've got them effectively sponsoring the show just for this month. They've got a 25% off discount off nameplates for the whole of May. And you can go and check them out on Facebook and on their website, and I'll put links in the show notes. But, I've talked about these before. I think they're brilliant for Adeptus Titanicus in making clear which Titan's which when you're doing your, you've got multiple control boards out. But also, if you're playing smaller skirmish type games, you can name everyone. They're really good for that. Or if you just want your character to stand out that little bit more, you can put a nameplate on their base and paint it all up.
Cool.
And the service is really good as well. The guys are great over there. So, yeah, Versatile Terrain. It's good to have them on board for, even if it's probably just a short little run, but it's all good. It's all good. Anyway, have you been painting, Neil?
I've started doing a bit of painting. Yes, I'm trying to get my mojo back, and I've been doing a bit of painting on the Tidecaster for Golden Demon. For the Golden Demon heavy metal challenge.
Sure.
So I started doing that. Painting AOS isn't my bag normally, as you know. So interesting to sort of get stuck into a bit of that and playing around with a few different techniques and a few things I haven't done in the past. So mucking about with some water effects, mucking about with some stippling and bits and pieces like that as well. So, quite doing a few things. Everything I seem to be doing with this Tidecaster is always a bit of a journey into the unknown. So
Sure.
It's a bit of a learning curve. Every time I go to do a colour, it's always usually a colour I haven't done before or something. So it's challenging and fun at the same time.
Cool. We'll see you doing some heresy something at some point, I'm sure.
Well, if they bring some new heresy stuff out, maybe I'll do so.
There's a load of Blood Angels and White Scars just been released.
Yeah, not really. Do you know what? I quite like the White Scars. That's one thing I probably would, if I was to do let's say if I was to do a one-off piece, if it was a competition or something like that, I think White Scars would probably be what I'd do them. So I really do like the new look and feel of the White Scars. I think they do look good.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll get a load more information at Warhammer Fest. That's not far off now. So we will be looking at seeing what else is coming. I mean, there's still stuff that we're waiting on to come out and everything as well. Hopefully, as I say, well, Warhammer Fest is going to be interesting. It's my first time to talk to any of those guys in a while, and it's, I don't know, it feels like now Book 8's out, it's a chance to almost focus forward from that. Whereas it felt like, from the outside anyway, it felt like at the Weekender, the focus was very much on that book. Without having all the details. Now we've got that, we can look at that book, but we can also look forwards at some other stuff as well. So that'll be interesting. I have started on my Demons of the Ruined Storm project. I purchased Mazaral the Butcher, Demon Prince of Khorne, which I think it's got a Stormcast head on it, but I don't know. I thought it was in the. I don't know if it was in the Age of Sigmar section or both. But anyway, it's he's a big beastie. I literally just finished putting him together. I've got a feeling he might need to be pinned to a base, and I might have to use slightly stronger glue as well, just to make sure, because he's a chunky monkey.
What sort of glue do you normally use? I mean, I take it we're talking super glue here, but do you use a particular brand?
I use Loctite at the moment.
That's pretty good stuff then.
Yeah.
I've had a few people use that and it's pretty solid.
Yeah, I use a brush on stuff. I like the control of the brush because I have a tendency to every now and then fat finger over pour. But the feet aren't huge on him, and he's a decent sized base and he's gluing onto resin. So he's got he stands up with his foot on a little rock. And I just think, it's going to be one of those ones where he might come off a few times if I just super glue him. So I might have to, maybe pin, maybe look at maybe doing it a slightly different way. We'll see. We shall see. But that's it's the start of my Ruined Storm army. I spent far too much with Mercia miniatures over the Easter. So they had for Salute, they had a 20% discount at Merce on the stand. And I hadn't had a chance to really go and look at the Demon Army till after that, at which point I then realised, actually, I think I said before that, I want to do the Khorne Army, the Crimson Fury. I don't mind having blood letters. I don't mind having Khorne symbols on there. That's fine. I know the Imperium don't know who Khorne is, but Khorne knows who Khorne is. But with the amount of big models and the variety that comes with that, I wanted something that wasn't just a different bloodthirster. So I think I dropped like 450 quid on big Mercia miniatures, and then bought Mazaral or whatever his name is, which isn't actually terribly bad. It's like 77 quid or 80 quid on Forge World.
That's not bad.
And I haven't actually. So when I normally order Forge World, I'm normally going up to. I normally pick it up. So if I didn't want to start this so soon, I'd have just picked it up at Warhammer Fest. That's what I used to do. So kind of that's what I think. I'm going up there. I'll get it then. To then remember that it's free postage, over £75, and it turned up the day afterwards. Like,
wow.
It came out. I mean, maybe they had a quiet day or whatever, and it was obviously on the shelf, something like that. But I was like, oh wow, there's a box here. Oh, that's a Forge World box. That was quite awesome actually. I was like, oh,
impressive. It's
like they've moved into the 21st century.
It's like ordering something from Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. So so it hath begun. I'm going to wait till the rest of the stuff comes in, and I'm going to have to work out exactly how I'm going to go ahead with that. But it's good to get that done. I've also picked up a load of Sisters of Silence with that someone else had converted. Luke Morton had converted. So there's some grenade launchers. I think we talked about this. The grenade launchers for the Sisters that you don't get grenade launchers, and all the hands are attached to the gun, the hand that supports the barrel of a bolt gun. It's attached to the gun. So he'd converted them, and then they're not cheap because the way he did it. But I'm like, you know what? They're all done. There's enough there that I don't think I need any more. Yeah, I'll take them off your hands. Saves me the hassle of doing it. But it's, you know, I'm still trying to sell off loads of old projects. We had a big Warhammer event the weekend, and I filled like the rest of the car up with stuff to sell, and didn't sell a huge amount of it, but still got like 160 quid or something like that, you know. Bought most of it back. So, yeah, got to break up stuff now for eBay. In fact, I forgot to post that stuff today. So I need to post some stuff for eBay as well tomorrow. So that's good. It's always a nice one to remember. So kind of plugging away. I'll put a picture up online, actually. You will, if you haven't seen it already, then you can go back and check on the Facebook page. It'll be on there. I'll try and put it on all three as well. The only thing I have got to do is I'm using Hive Tyrants as shrikes. So again, I don't know if I talked about this on the show, but so wings, technically, like you can buy wings for your demons, and that gives them a jump pack move. But you can also have flying monstrous creatures, or so. If you just represent that with wings, and you've got like a big beast with wings and another big beast with wings, and they're representing two different things, I think that's like a little bit confusing. So I wanted something that's slightly more in a flying pose, and I couldn't find anything for shrikes either, which are flying monstrous creatures. So I'm going to try and convert up a Tyranid Hive Tyrant.
Cool.
Well, yeah, it might be interesting. I might have to do some green stuff on his ribs, and might have to cut away some of the carapace and green stuff over that as well. But yeah, it's all going on the pile. Stuff to get done, and I've got a new job as well, and I've got a lot less time to do stuff I want. Like a lot less time. I'm working longer hours than I was, and can't do as much while I'm there either, which, you know, I knew was going to happen. But like getting home tonight and trying to catch up on Game of Thrones. You know, I'm still late on Game of Thrones, but trying to catch up before anyone spoils too much. Unfortunately, people don't seem to know how to not talk about stuff online. And then all of a sudden, like, half your evening's gone. It's like, you know. But got to work a new system while still trying to get up early. But could be worse. Got to pay for the money. Got to pay for the toys somehow, haven't we?
Exactly. As long as you've got a job, that's the main thing. Yeah.
We're moving on with that. So I mentioned Warhammer Fest. If you're listening to this before Warhammer Fest in 2019, then I'm going to be there on the Saturday. You're going to be there on the Sunday, aren't you?
I'll be there on the Sunday.
Yeah, I think I'm picking up Michael and a friend of ours, Howard, as well. So we'll have a little bit of a car trip up. Hopefully, might be able to do some recording. We'll see how noisy it all is, but looking forward to it. Do you normally go to the seminars, or do you just hang around the painting area when you go?
I think I've been to some of them sometimes. Mainly, I hang around in the painting area. Last year, I took my son Noah with me, and I'm doing the same this year.
Right.
So usually that is going around, looking at all of the, speaking to as many people as possible, but being mindful that he's going to, got to keep him entertained as well. So seminars aren't really probably the best thing.
No, probably not. Okay, that's interesting this year. They've really broken the seminars down. There's lots of them over 2 days.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know. I assume that Warhammer Community is going to have all the juicy details up straight away. So part of me was like, I don't know which one. Like, I want to go to. Do I go to the Forge World one? And then I kind of thought, actually, for the first time, all the information is going to go up, and then you're going to listen to a bunch of questions that, are going to be. Even the Forge World ones, most of the questions are pretty not inane, but they're nothing questions.
Predictable.
Yeah, and there's always someone who asks, "Oh, when are you doing this?" And you're never going to get an answer for that. That kind of thing. So I'm actually thinking this year of trying to make sure I get the time in talking to people at the tables rather than going to the seminars for information. I think we'll have to see how it pans out. It also means we don't have to make sure we're there to get seminar tickets. So we can roll up. True. We can roll up at 10:30, have that extra half hour in bed, which makes a difference when you're travelling quite far. And then you don't have to get there for the queue because you can't get there at 10 and walk straight in anyway. If you want to get there and really get in early, you've got to get there, 45 minutes beforehand at least. So actually, it makes a big difference in the amount of time extra that you get to, be asleep on what becomes a longish day as it is. So, yeah, I think that's the plan. But if you see any of us, I'm sure, if you see me around, come say hi. It's fine. That's cool. Enjoy that. Hopefully I'll be with it enough to have a chat. Not too tired after the trip up. We'll see. We might be doing it in stages. Might be staying at a mate's house, which helps. But get a good breakfast and get up there. That's another thing you've got to do as well. Yeah, food's not cheap up there, is it? And it's not great.
No, I mean, I think I've only ever bought like the odd sandwich up there.
Yeah.
And it's been all right, but it's not cheap and it's not great, I wouldn't say, yeah.
So I might have to chuck some stuff in the car or a bag. I don't know what their policy is, but I'm sure we can get around it somehow.
I'm sure worst case scenario, you can leave it in the car and go and get it later. But
yeah, exactly. That's always a possibility. Though if you are getting there later, the car park is that much further away over the road up there. But it is what it is. It is what it is. We could probably talk about what Forge World have been up to, which is not a lot, as you said.
No.
We have got book 4 out in softback now.
Yes.
So if you don't have it, I know a friend of mine is selling his on eBay at the moment. It's his hardback copy. Needs to raise some funds, and there's a quick way of doing that is to sell your book 4 and 6. But it's good to see them coming out. It's temporarily out of stock. Actually, I just looked.
Oh, really?
It's £45. I kind of don't know. I suppose that's a fair price. Actually, it's still a big book, isn't it? Just feels like, I think the fact it's softback, kind of that price tag sounds high.
Yeah,
but it has to be. It's still the same size book. It's just not bound the same way in the leather. Mm-hmm. Well, at least it's available for people who want it. But I think that's been about it. We did have weapons for Titans.
Yes.
They went out of stock very quickly. Then they came back into stock, I believe, and then they went out of stock again by the looks of it. Yeah. So the Quake cannon and the macro Gatling blaster. Just again, for those who aren't aware, Games Workshop are still waiting to move into their new, or fully move into their new building. I think a very small portion is in, but it's not up and running properly yet. Forge World. It must be interesting for Forge World because I know they've got a load of machines ready to go for plastic production. I suppose they're going to give Forge World more room because they need it. They're going out of stock of a fair amount of stuff, and it always scares the living daylights out of people. I actually think Just Staring came off. I think they went on. Let me just double check before I say that. Oh no, you can buy Just Staring. They must have been repackaged. Any time anything kind of seems to have anything happen to it online, people fear the worst, and these panicked posts appear on Facebook. I've got a feeling we are going to get general kind of release windows for some of the less popular stuff. Because they made like some of the stuff we saw. So the land speeder, the White Scars one. The guys are in Mark II armor. But you can't buy Mark II at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a period at some point where they say, okay, for the next 2 months you can order, or 4 weeks, you can order Mark II armor. What do you want? And we'll go and make it on demand. Because
that would make sense.
It's a way to get around the fact that they have this stuff sat on shelves if they stock it and it doesn't seem to move very quickly. But there are those people who are desperate for it. So you build up that level of kind of, you allow people to build up, prepare for it almost. I think it could work if they said, okay, in June for 2 weeks, you can print on demand effectively Mark II, basic dudes and weapon and 3 or 4 different things, and there'll be a delayed getting it to you period of time. It would allow people to say, oh yeah, I wanted Mark II for whatever Legion I'm doing. I'll put some money away. I don't know.
People might buy it thinking, well, if it's only available for a few months, I'll get some.
Yeah,
keep it in the cupboard. So if I do need it,
yeah, I don't know if they would ever give us a date of in 2 months' time we're doing this. But even if it was like, okay, at some point in the future we're going to do print on demand for this, because they're very protective of their dates, possibly a little bit overprotective, but even that would help. I think, and would be quite cool to those people who feel like, particularly the people who missed out, and some of the stuff does go for, Forge World holds its value anyway, but when it's going out of production, it's like, people paying 150%, 200% on what it was. It's not the best thing, but yeah, it's been pretty quiet, hasn't it?
It has. I thought we might have seen a bit more stuff starting to happen by now.
I'm trying to think. Off the top of my head, I can't think of what's kind of done that we haven't seen. I don't know. There's almost too much. There was a lot this weekend. We had a lot of that quite early pre-release look, didn't we? I don't know. It almost seems so built up on Sanguinius and the book, and now that's out. It's like, oh yeah, there was other stuff going on. But as I say, with Warhammer Fest, you would hope we'd start a new cycle and get a little bit out. I mean, there's still plenty of space to go back, and they need to kind of cover up. I wouldn't mind to start to see the Demon releases. I don't think we will for a while. I think they're quite happy to say go and buy GW kits. They're still getting the money, but as I said, I think I said before, if I wasn't doing Crimson Fury, if I was doing particularly one of the 2 emanations which doesn't tie into one of the 4 gods, I want something that's really different. And as I said, people are doing Sylvaneth models from Age of Sigmar. They're still quite treey. There's a lot of leaves and things on them, and you'd have to go in and to really do it, you'd have to go in and sort that out, which I'm not prepared to do. Plus, they're quite limited in Tree Revenants, Kurnoth Hunters, the ogre-sized things that they're coming 3 poses based on their 3 weapons, but their feet and their body are roughly the same on all of them. Dryads, Dryad's cool, but also if you're going to represent emanations on models, then you really, in my opinion, if you're kind of going to events and that kind of thing, I think you should be representing at least that units are different, that they can work that way. It doesn't necessarily... So a big sword could be Crushing Claws or whatever the rending is, whichever way round it is. I can't remember off the top of my head. And that's fine. That's cool. Like in an army, if you've only got swords and you use them one time as as claws and one time as something else, then more or whatever it is, then that's kind of fine. I don't mind that. But if they're in the same army, like, I don't think you should be using the same thing. I think it should be really easily, it should be identifiable that they are different. And when I was making my army, I said last time about using blood letters and maybe swapping units and things like that. And actually, I got to the point where when I was writing the list, I was like, well, I was trying to work out what I need, what's good. And then I remembered it's heresy. And I'm like, well, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, it can have weaknesses. That's fine. It doesn't have to worry about who I'm playing if I get to the top tables. Within reason, you obviously want it to work well. So I was actually, right, I'm going to give almost every model in my army the collars of corn, and all the blood letters will have, the swords will represent rending attacks. And that's simple, and I'll keep that as a theme throughout the whole army, even if it's not necessarily the best option. The only exception for that was you don't want to have games where you don't feel like you can do anything. So there's a couple of small squads of guys who can swap their attacks for strength 10 AP1 attack, or double strength AP1 attacks, to try and take out vehicles. Because the last it could easily happen with some demon armies that you come up against a Spartan or two and nothing can crack it, and they sit inside it for a few turns and wait for you to start to fade a little bit and then come out and hurt you. And that doesn't sound as fun to me. I want a chance, at least, even if it's rolling, even if it's getting a little bit lucky to try and sort them out. I want a chance. So I'm going to have like 10 models in my army which aren't bloodletters, but I'm going to try and work out how to do that one going forwards. I think the Warcry stuff from Age of Sigmar that's coming, there's some cool Fury type things in there. So I want to see those models in the flesh, because these are going to have wings as well, because you're going to need that jump pack move. People aren't going to just leave their tanks lying around for you to go and kill. So they need to be able to get there and do it, because they're going to be dead as soon as they're out in the open. That's kind of a thing to think about as well. I heard a lot of people recently talking about the demon list. We're gonna jump onto that at some point. We're gonna jump onto all this stuff. I still want it to settle a little bit. There's still a lot of kind of a hypothesis. People have played one or two games and they're making grand statements about things, and I'm like, well, I'm not 100% sure that's true. I'm sure there are circumstances which these people are talking about which can happen, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I haven't even had much chance to go through book 8. It's with other stuff, as soon as you have, like this week, I literally found some time to hobby tonight, but that's mainly because we actually couldn't record last night. Otherwise it would have been mainly editing tonight. So and tomorrow night I'm out all night. Thursday night I'm out all night. Friday I might find some time, and I'm away all weekend hobbying, to be fair, but learning on the paint course with Vince Ventrilla, so it's not like I'm sitting here working on my army. And part of Friday night's going to be preparing for that, actually, so I don't know how much actual hobby time I'll get, because I need to pack up the airbrush and everything else and make sure it's all there ready to go. Try and find my one or two.
I find those days as well, they can burn you out a bit, so that you actually think, I've gone on a few painting courses before, and I thought, well, what I'll do is when I get there, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, and you think you're going to be really productive, but actually, it actually just can really sort of take it out of you, those painting courses. And by the end of it, you just want to go to sleep and not hobby for a few days.
Yeah, there is potential for that, and that's sort of what happened last time with the 101 course, and I didn't pick up the airbrush quick enough, and that information's there, but it's going to be hard. It's going to take me time to get back to where I was. Whereas had I come home, used the airbrush straight away, I think it would have stuck that little bit better.
Definitely.
So there is so I kind of need to force myself to paint early next week, even if it's only for a little bit, just to kind of maybe go back over the bits we're taught, and shown on that course. But I'm sure there'll be stuff next week that all piles up. Life has a way of doing that to you, doesn't it? Even if it's not like anything major, it's just time and everything else. So, and with being in a new job and trying to learn like new computer systems and stock systems and things like that as well. Like part of my brain capacity is being used for that when I come home and make time to sit and actually watch Game of Thrones without doing something else at the same time, which
trying to sit down and enjoy it,
which is quite a rare thing now, and like we're not going to get to see Endgame. We got the bank holiday weekend coming up, May Day. I think we're going to try and go and see Endgame on May Day, and again hoping that no one spoils it in the meantime. But time flies.
It does indeed.
Yes, groovy. Okay, we'll leave that there. We'll come back and we're going to talk about hockey. So Neil, you've been playing around with a few different things recently, some water effects and some dry brushing. You've been using the Artist Opus Series D, haven't you?
I have indeed, yes.
Which I don't know when the Kickstarter ends, but there'll be a link in the show notes. And there's certainly,
I think it's pretty soon, although I know with these things you can always get on them even after the Kickstarter ends.
They usually have a backer kit thing that you can jump on, but there's a link certainly on Facebook. I'll try and put it in the show notes. If you want to support the show and go through that, then we do get a little bit of a kickback on that. So first off, let's explain the Artist Opus Series D. So Artist Opus made a series of brushes, last year, was it?
I think it was last year.
Yeah, last year, which did very well, and they were just regular paintbrushes, in quotation marks. But the Series D is something slightly different, isn't it? Yeah.
So the Series D is obviously stands for dry brushing, but it's not just it is at the end of the day it is a brush, but it's also a bit of a reinvention of the technique that we probably all know from dry brushing in the past. So, I still haven't got to fully grips with the of exactly mastering the technique, but effectively the technique evolves around obviously a differently designed shape brush, which is obviously a rounded brush, a rounded head rather than like a flat dry brush, and a moistening pad. So the idea is that you moisten the bristles before you then apply the dry brush. To help lubricate as you do to create a smoother finish rather than that really rough texture that you get from dry brushing normally with a normal brush. So the idea is that you can stop the so you can get a smoother finish on the model and obviously just make you can do more sort of blended sort of effects rather than a sort of a very rough and ready something that in the past dry brushing I'd only ever use if I was doing a bit of a piece of scenery or some work on a base. This is basically something that you can then do. You can create a bit of a transition with and then glaze over it or do other things with it, so it's not just a base technique. So Byron's been doing this for quite some time. And he's been working on he's been using this technique for a while, and then they've decided to release a brush set that enables you to recreate this technique. And they've been doing a lot of demos. You probably may have seen on Instagram and Facebook. They've been doing a lot of live streaming where they've been showing how this technique works. So I think the fear is that people just get them and just dry brush with them normally, which is not what they're intending. I know that David Soper did a recent video with the guys at Artis Opus, and he says you do have this inbuilt autopilot when you dry brush. Like you pick up a model, you get the dry brush, and you just start flicking it about. Whereas this technique that Byron is sort of championing it's a much softer, delicate sort of stippling and sort of lightly brushing the paint onto the model, and that's helping with the dampening pad so that you don't get a rough finish to the model. And I've watched him do it at Adepticon, and it's quite intriguing technique, because when you see the finished model, it does look very, very impressive. And he does this sort of, he explained it. He did explain to me with all how you mix the colours, how you dampen the pad, and how you put that on the brush to enable a smoother transition. So I started playing around with these yesterday. I've had them for quite some time, and I was mainly using them for stippling and just applying some transition work onto the base for the Tidecaster, and they do feel very good. They feel feel very easy to use. I'm still not 100%. I don't think I'm doing the moistening of the bristles probably in the right way, but they do create a nice effect as you apply them onto the model. So it's do you do a lot of dry brushing, Greg?
Yeah, a bit. I'm the laziest dry brush in the world. I can never be bothered to do it properly, which is crazy, really, because it's dry brushing. It's a useful tool, particularly for things like metals and stuff like that, like chainmail, that kind of thing.
Metallics I think have always been a good solid staple, haven't they, for dry brushing?
Really easy to hit those few bits. And furs, metallics and furs, I think generally I just kind of go for the, as you say, the basic easy kind of aspect of it. I haven't had a chance to look at those videos yet. I've kind of had them, had the thing described to me by a number of people, but essentially, because it makes it sound like they're selling a technique. They've got brushes and they've got these wet pads as well. The dampening pads, that's the one. But they've actually gone and done the brush on this. And this is, this has ended up being a little bit of an advert. All hands up, as I say, I've got an affiliate link. But I've talked to a number of painters who've used it, who value it. So, I'm happy kind of to put that forwards. If it was me using it, I don't know how much weight that has, but the people I've listened to, Caleb, CK said you've said it, and as David Soper, like if it's good enough for David Soper, it's good enough for me. I might have to look at getting these.
The way I look at it is I don't really go in for the stipply sort of effects normally. I'm much more a controlled brush sort of person, like a much more sort of a finesse sort of painter. But I must admit, it does have a very quick and gratifying way of getting paint down. Almost the way that sometimes, when something happens too quickly for me when I'm painting, I feel as though I must be doing it wrong, because I think, it must take longer than this to get this sort of, to get this done. So sometimes I end up going back and then maybe overworking something and trying to do it too much because I'm concerned that I'm doing it too quickly.
Yeah.
But I found them very useful, and I think the more. Obviously, I think the more you do with it, the more, like anything, the more you practice with something, I think you'll get much better effects as well.
Yeah, so that you can dry brush normally with them as well.
You could definitely. I think you could
it's important to say that
and dry brush them normally. But I think if you did that, it's almost would be a bit of a shame, because you.
Sure. Yeah.
I think the whole point of these is the new technique to try out.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you have got that need for that harsh dry brushing, there might be a reason for it. You can still do that. So the thing about this is they've spent 4 years working on these brushes. there's a lot of people comparing them to makeup brushes. A lot of people use soft bristle makeup brushes for dry brushing. Completely understandably. You can pick them up cheap. The soft bristles allow, it allows an effect that people like, because again, different things, different effects. It's not necessarily better or anything else. But these are goat hair designed to wear down, aren't they? So
yes, I know that.
That's a big thing.
There's a big thing about them, how they slowly wear down as you use them, and they create like a tulip effect on the brush. So they don't just sort of, they're quite soft and they degrade, but they degrade in the way that you get more use out of them. So they don't just degrade and after say 10 uses they're no good. You need to replace them.
Yeah, whereas if you go and buy a cheap makeup brush, then hairs will fall out because they're synthetic or whatever. Yeah. So that's a difference. So I think if you want to go and see, you have to go and see the videos to understand. I've had someone try to explain it. I kind of get it. I'm going to sit down and look at the videos. I don't know, because they're not cheap. I don't know if I'm going to jump in on a Kickstarter. It's going to be a long time. Well, it's going to be towards the end of the year when they're actually available and being shipped to people. But it might be one of those things where I jump on it later. And yeah,
Yeah, and the good thing is with all these things is they are available after. I'm not a big fan of Kickstarter. I'd rather pay my money and just get the product as and when I want it. But if you wait for Kickstarter to end, you then can. I think you can just then go to many different retail outlets and hopefully order them and get them delivered to you.
Yeah, there'll be
one or whatever you need.
Yeah, there'll be an element. Artis Opus aren't a large company, so Kickstarter to pay for all those like upfront costs is not necessarily a bad option for them. But so this is a type of technique which is new. And interesting to see if it does become a thing, because I suppose painting can only have so many kind of new things. Whatever we do in the world, whatever hobby we're doing or sport or whatever, techniques and things don't change very often. There's only
that's true.
We've got to a point in the world now where progress can still happen, obviously, but we've been pretty rapid with it. We're getting quite good at reaching a pinnacle. Whether it's the pinnacle, we've reached a pinnacle. So it'll be interesting to see if that goes on. And it doesn't change the fact that dry brushing's still there as a base technique that is there. And makeup brushes, the harder, like the GW dry. I quite like the GW dry brush. I think it's a decent dry brush. It's obviously firmer than the makeup brushes. And this,
yes, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's a harder brush.
Yeah, but again, if you're doing particularly something like metal, then you've got those. I don't think it matters on those things, and sometimes it creates a little bit more of that harsher highlight, which is sometimes what you want.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, for me, it does depend on what you're doing. Like I said, I don't ever really,
absolutely.
I never really use dry brushing that much. So for me, I'm sort of looking at the whole sort of thing with a fresh take on it, because I never really did that much dry brushing.
Sure.
So whatever I get out of it is probably going to be a big benefit.
It's the same as it's the same as any technique, though, isn't it? There's multiple ways to affect a technique, and people will have their kind of ideas on what is best for them and what they prefer, and people will also have kind of more natural styles as well. That's just the way it is.
Completely.
I say when I dry brush, I don't always get the brush necessarily as dry as a lot of other people would, and that does different things at the end of the day. But I usually know that that's an aspect of how I paint. So I've been painting that way for a long time, so I know what's going to happen. Whereas if someone else tried it first time, they'd do something completely different because they're used to what they do. So and it's good to try things out to a point. if you want to get better at painting, then yeah, trying new stuff out is great. If you just want to paint your army, then sometimes you just want to go, you know what, I just want to paint this army the way I know I paint this army. I just want to crack it out.
Tried and trusted technique sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's that kind of done. You've been playing around with some water effects as well.
Yeah, I've been like I said at the start of the show, I've been doing this Tidecaster, and it has meant that I've been playing around with a lot of things that I haven't done either never done before or things for the very first time. And so one of those was I was playing around with some water effect resins. So do you remember when I did the Space Marine with the guy in the jar next to him, the sort of the injured Space Marine next to him?
Yeah.
When I did him, I knew that I needed some sort of clear resin to do, and what I did was I basically bought a batch load of like loads of different brands to just like 2-part resins, some water effect resins, all different things, just so I could see what worked. But it very quickly became clear that I needed obviously like a 2-part resin that I was going to cast effectively in a mold. Sure. So the other ones I sort of bought loads of water effect resins and water effects, and then just put it all in a drawer. And it was only when I thought, maybe I'll try out and practice with a few resins on the Tidecaster base. So I got them all out, and I was playing around with them today. So I've been playing around with the Vallejo ones, the water texture acrylic, so the still water, and their transparent water, where you can sort of sculpt it on the base, create all the peaks and stuff of the water. So I've been playing around with that today and adding some colours to it, and that works. I've got some good effects with that. I've managed to sort of create some decent looking, that turquoisey looking water.
Yeah, well, you mean mixing the colour in when you're mixing the resin?
Yes, mix a bit of paint in there. I've been using the watercolour transparent colours because I've got the transparent turquoise colour, which I use a lot on the model. So I've mixed a bit of that in, thinking that using a transparent, sort of like a thinner colour, will probably aid the mix into the resin, so it won't be too strong.
Sure.
So it's probably a little bit more forgiving. So I've been playing around with that today. But you then did send me a rather cool link, didn't you?
Yes.
Something you'd seen online.
This just popped up, and it's one of those things. I don't know if I would ever use it, because I don't know if I'd have the skill to use it without some serious practice. But it's Green Stuff World, and you can go to their Twitter handle at Green Stuff World, nice and easy. And it's essentially this guy's pouring out of a squeezy bottle, and he has a UV light right next to it, and this water effect resin is being built up in a kind of like a statue almost. So he gets it about an inch off the thing, and he literally is just pouring it out of a bottle and then holding this UV light down on it, and it creates this clear kind of stand. Like, just the fact that you don't have to mix it or anything else seems amazing. Because that
what I think is quite clever is the fact that it was set under that UV light, so you could really play around with it, couldn't you? Get it into something you want to, and then just blast it with UV light, and then it'll be ready to go. So
one of the problems that I always remember people talking about and watching people talk about with trying to create water effects and things like that is getting that clouding in it, and make sure the resin's right and everything else, and making sure it's all dry before you put the next layer on and things like that. And they show on this video, I don't know how long it takes to dry properly, but it's pretty clear all the way through.
It's very clear, in fact. Actually, like crystal clear, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you need to do an area and you can just pour that stuff in, potentially with UV light. Hello, Magnus. Magnus is upset for some reason. There's that's a really good kind of thing. If you can do it that easy, cost always becomes an issue. I don't know how much it's going to cost, but that's pretty. And you're going to need the UV light. I can't imagine that's that much. In fact, just been €7.85 for 30 ml of water effect resin. That's not terrible. That's not terrible, is it? I don't know how much the UV light is. I can't imagine it's that much nowadays for a UV light. But yeah,
I thought it's fairly cheap.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see kind of how far that could go, because they've also got pictures of making moulds and using it on moulds. So getting some putty out, making a mould of whatever you want, and then literally just pouring this stuff in UV light, and you've got a clear mould done. Which
it does look cool. I must admit, it's something that maybe it's one of those ones that it's worth a play around with. I think because you could do some really cool. The fact that you can set it with the UV light, I think, gives it a lot of durability. You can do all sorts with it.
I kind of want to know more in a way, because I'm just thinking as well. Sometimes you get that little thing you want multiples of. You're not going to do this to sell it or anything like that. But if there's always, whenever you think of a really cool conversion, there's usually one little bit that causes the problem. You're like, I'm going to have to buy 10 boxes of that for that little piece, and then try and sell them back on and lose money, and it will become expensive. If it's that easy to mould something, then again, you're not mixing anything and stuff like that. It's always the stuff that put me off making a mould.
Making a mould and the whole sort of the mixing of the resins and the bubbles and all of that sort of stuff. If you've got something that actually is pretty stable, and you can just pour it out of a basically a squeezy bottle,
and essentially,
you pour it onto and then you literally just blast it with a light to set it. It's a pretty easy way of doing it.
Yeah, if all you need is the putty that you're actually making the mould out of, press whatever you want into it and make sure it's flat on a flat surface and flat on top, so when you pour in, it's even. Like, they make it look very easy. If it is that easy, then that's pretty awesome. So, ultra fast, here we go. 2 to 4 minutes for the UV torch. Or on a sunny day, 5 to 10 minutes. Blimey. There we go. And apparently UV resin doesn't shrink like some other water replicating materials. So that's an interesting one. And you can cut and polish it and do everything else. And the ultraviolet torch is for €4.50. So
not exactly super expensive, is it really?
Yeah, I kind of half tempted to go and buy some. Waste 15 quid on getting, not even that, on getting a load of stuff. 12 quid. It's almost worth a shout, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. I think you have to pay a fair bit of postage for
I'm sure.
Stuff.
I'm sure you do. Yeah.
I think it all comes from Spain, but it's they are coming out with some really interesting products at the moment. Green Stuff World.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see as well as we move forwards now. Like the hobbies, it's been big for a while, but I kind of get the feeling we're seeing a little bit more go on around that kind of cool side of things. Maybe I'm just more aware of it. I don't know. The hobbies always move forwards and things like that. But things like just looking at that, and I'm sure there's other stuff. Someone's going to say, "Oh, this person's been doing this for 2 years," but I haven't really seen any of it. My memory is, as you say, 2-part resin mixtures. You've got to mix it all up perfectly. Make sure you put it down in thin layers. Let it dry. Another thin layer. That could be a real kind of. It's a very different from what they are showing. If that works, how that works.
Yeah, definitely.
And the ability to go vertical that easily as well.
Well, it shows you how versatile it is, isn't it? With the fact you can cast it by pouring it out of the pot and blasting it with a UV torch.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's the next thing we start to see a lot more of that in the painting world. It also makes it viable for an army. Whereas again, whenever I saw water effects, it was display board or single miniature piece or diorama, whatever. Didn't see a huge amount on armies because of the pain to do it, because particularly to put it on a base, you need to build up the sides and what have you. With that, there's potential there that you can pour it onto the base. If you go over the edge a little bit, they said it can be worked, right? So you can just kind of sand it back or what have you, but and crack on. So, lots of cool stuff. Anything else you've been playing with?
That was really it mainly. Like I said, there's quite a lot to do with water effects. There's all sorts of things to try, but that's really all I've been up to of late.
All right, well, maybe we'll get you to put some photos of the water effects.
Yes, yeah. It's funny because while we've been talking, I've actually, where I've put a load of water effects on, I've actually made, because it goes quite rubbery, I've actually peeled it off. So you sort of have a few goes at this. So the first one I did, I thought, do you know what? I'm not too happy with that. It got up the side of the base slightly.
Sure.
And I thought, can I get rid of that? And then, of course, because it's so rubbery, you pick at the edge and you literally can just peel the whole lot off. So I've just peeled it off. I'm going to do it again in a minute. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. As I say, that kind of boggles my mind when you think back to the, I've poured it, it's gone wrong, it's too late, we'll just have to hope it works out all right in the end, because it needs to sit there for 4 hours to settle in, as I say, I'm sure there are plenty of other things going on in other areas, and it'll be interesting to see if anyone listening's kind of got a product or knows of a product that's changing things in the way we hobby. Feel free to send us in a shout, I think, because it's always good to be on the lookout for these things. They tend to get shared very, very quickly. I know people got all excited about that matte black, that blackest black and all that paints you can get. I'm not 100% sure that was in the painting world much more than a gimmick.
What black was that?
It's not there was a real dark matte black. Exactly, it might even be that point where it is just that kind of thing. I can't remember exactly what it was. I keep thinking of that. The scientists made that blackest black ever. It's not that. The one that absorbs light completely. But this was a real dark black. I kind of like, to a point, black is black. Like, I think people have been painting black for quite a while very well. And in fact, as we know, any kind of painter, you very rarely would use pure black anyway, because unless most of the time I'm looking to make it not black. Exactly. So the ability to go even more black seems a little bit like you're wasting your time. In terms of competition painting and everything else, and just seems a little bit like, I could do that, but there's no need for the army painters as well. So there's always these products that come on and disappear quite quickly. Some of them sound better in principle than they ever will be in real life, and that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? Definitely, yeah. Cool. All right then. We'll take a break there, and we'll come back and talk with Howard about the solar war. Joining me once again, we have Michael. How are you doing, Michael?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Excellent stuff. That's what we like to hear. And we're going to be talking about a little-known book called The Solar War. What is it? Only the second book that I know of to break the Black Library website? Is it second?
Yeah, something like that. There's certainly not been that many where that's happened.
No, 2 or 3. So Aaron and John are sitting pretty, claiming those titles. Which is kind of apt, really, that it's those two.
A bit of a badge of honour, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into this, I saw John walking around at Salute and was talking to him about the Solar War. And I was like, so I know Slaves to Darkness had that tough kind of deal of X amount of characters, which ones to put in, which ones to leave out, trying to give them enough kind of screen time, as it were. And I was like, so Solar War, how hard was that to plan out? And he was just like, yeah. Yeah.
I just can't even imagine.
No, and that's probably information that other people need as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he was pretty happy. And I don't think he'd really been online much afterwards. So it was good to chat to him a little bit about that. But yeah, the Solar War, the first book in the Siege of Terror. We've talked about the issues around purchasing it, so we won't go over that. The physical copy is a thing of beauty, though.
Without a doubt, it is a genuinely lovely item, and sort of in as much as any book can really justify a £50 price tag. I mean, it pretty much does. It almost justifies it just for the map at the front.
Yeah, it's so. I haven't really collected books, but I've purchased a number of books over my time. I'm sure you have as well.
Yes.
And I look at the Games Workshop limited editions that have come out, and it's fair to say some have been better than others. I don't think I even purchased the limited edition. I don't know whether they were a limited run. I think the Terry Pratchett leather bound books when they came out. That I sold them last year because they only did. I think they did 18 before they stopped doing it. So I was like, if I can't collect them all, then I don't want them. Because an incomplete collection is just weird.
Agreed.
But I still sold them for, I think, £500 because they were lovely and a collection. This book is the best book I've owned in terms of something pretty sat on my shelf.
Okay, high praise.
I think, and actually, there is some kind of joy I get from having it on my shelf. And you're right, it's £50, but just the fact it's there, like I've got copies of it. I'm quite happy to have, like, I've got all my Gaunt's Ghost books. I haven't even got all of them in physical copy, but they're battered and whatever. And it's like, cool, but it's fine. I've got them there. But knowing I've got that book is like, that's pretty cool. Actually, I quite like that. So yeah, when you are paying a price tag like that, the fact that for me, it has some effect outside of reading it is a big bonus to the fact that it's £50. I mean, I was going to buy it anyway. I'm a collector of this series, but it's nice to have that extra little bit on top.
Yeah, I think so. And I think they've done a really good job with the extra bits and pieces. So it's a beautiful item, faux leather bound, really nice sort of screen print, whatever it is on the front. A badge and everything, gold page edges. But then the front page of every chapter is beautifully illustrated. There's more than just the usual illustrations inside. So there's the sort of 4 standard black and white illustrations, but there's also a bunch of character pieces about some of the main characters in there. There's the map. But yeah, you get the sense that someone's thought, this is our headline range. We need to make an effort above and beyond what we normally do. And I think it's worked.
It'll be really, really interesting to see now what they do with the rest, because that's a hell of a high standard to set.
It's a high bar for sure.
And there's 7 more books to come. You don't want yours to be the one that's not quite as nice as the others.
Oh no, especially because that's not in the author's control.
Exactly, and it's not even that I'm worried that one's going to be bad. It's just you've set a standard, and I would love all of them to be that similar standard. But whether that's doable or not, we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we'll find out about the next one sometime later this year, with The Lost and the Damned, and I guess we'll take it from there. Yeah,
indeed. But let's have a brief overview. The Solar War. Go for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's if you're up to speed with the Heresy, then you'll know that by the end of 54, sort of all the pieces are in place. With the players where we expect them to be, all the different Primarchs. We've been through this, where each Primarch is in the run-up to the siege. And so the Solar War tackles literally the first steps of what you would really think of as the siege, which is Horus's fleets translating into the Sol system and tackling the first the first layers of defense. And there's quite a lot of complexity around how that works. It's not literally just a book about space battles. There's lots of space battles in it. But you've got various fleets led by or involving various characters. You've got Abaddon taking an unusual approach, sort of coming into the Sol system at a bit of an unexpected angle. You've got Sigismund defending the fifth sphere? The outer defences around Pluto.
I think so.
There's two sort of gates, the Chthonic Gate and the Elysian Gate, that mean it works slightly differently to how fleets can normally come into a system. And so you've got these two sort of defensive points where the Iron Warriors and co throw in ships at all these defences. You've got Sigismund defending one of those. You've got Halbracht, is it? I think defending another one. Like I said, Abaddon coming in at an angle. A few of the characters like Ahriman joining him. And then we've got a bit of a perspective of things on Terra. So there's Admiral Sukasen, who was in, I think, Praetorian of Dawn. She's sort of the human admiral who's controlling things from the Terran side. She's from the Jovian Void clan, so she's there on Terra with Dawn and Malcador and all that lot. And then you've got Mercedes Ollerton, so the Remembrancer right back in the original trilogy, and she's been in prison, and then she is moved from that prison, and things happen that set her off on a path to try and reach Terra. So you've got all these sort of strands and arcs happening, big battles taking place, people on Terra figuring out what to do, trying to work out, like, is it going our way? Do we need to worry? Ollerton taking her roundabout route, and Abaddon and Ahriman. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, coming at it from a sort of slightly oblique angle. Does that cover the non-spoiler précis of what you can expect?
I think so. Yes. I particularly was going into this book. Okay, it's the Siege of Terra. It's we know there's going to be a big space battle first, but actually, what does that mean? How far do we get? There's 8 books in this series. How much? It's really hard thing of how much fighting do you put in a book?
Yeah.
Because if it's all just fighting, you lose the reason why you're fighting, and you lose it becomes. Just becomes abstract almost. But if there isn't enough fighting, then you're going the other way, and things happen too quickly. It's a hard thing to get right, I think.
Yeah.
I think John manages to do that. On the scale of Black Library readers, I probably lean towards the slightly less fighting than many others. And that's cool. That's fine. For me, I thought this book was done very well. The other things it does is, so there's always been that kind of, as a battle historian, or as a space nut, how can Luna be a defensive? How can Pluto be a defensive thing in 3-dimensional space, and all those kind of issues, which are fair enough, actually. Sometimes they're not put across in the way that is best. But yeah, in a 3-dimensional space, how is one planet or not planet or whatever important? How does this work? How does that work? How do defenses work when you're trying to defend a whole Sol system and everything else? And actually, whether it's one of those things. It works in the story, whether it works outside or not. It works within the story.
Yeah,
and I think that was quite well done as well.
Yeah, I agree. Ultimately, this is the 6 weeks or whatever it is that it takes Horus's fleet to get from translating into the Sol system to bombarding Terra. So it could have been a book talking about 6 weeks of fighting, as you say. But I think you're right. I think John's got a good balance there. He's justified like why it takes that long, what the traitors have to go through to break through the rings of defense, what those rings of defense even are, where they are, how they work.
Yeah.
Without being, a sort of agonizingly detailed treatise on, the advanced military tactics of defending a solar system.
Yeah.
That it's a novel. It has to be a good story for it to work, and it is a good story. So you've got all those big battles and all that sort of stuff. Even more than straight from the off, you've got greater stakes than there's been ever really before in the Heresy, because you know what's happening. If they obviously they're not going to get stopped. The loyalists are not going to defeat them at Pluto, but you get that sense of every inch bought with blood, or at least with ships and oil and what have you. And that's cool and that's really powerful, but that would be really tiring on its own. So you've got that grand sweep of these huge space battles, and then you've got these very personal perspectives that really are drawn, in terms of the battles, a lot of those are drawn from Ollerton's perspective, or at least feeding into her arc, as these sort of ordinary humans are just traumatized by what's going on. You've got Sigismund. Essentially, we know he's been sent to the outer ramparts because Dawn's not happy with decisions he's made in the past. So he's out there for penance, and so he's trying to atone for what Dawn considers are, his sins. So you've got some interesting viewpoint characters that allowed John to show the big and the small, and put the massive battles into context, so that for every time, for every sort of page or chapter there is of fighting and spaceships exploding, you've got people observing that, or caught up in the middle of it, or sat on terror watching as the numbers rise and fall, giving some context, giving some sort of meaning behind what could otherwise have just been meaningless, overwhelming sort of shock and awe, which in a sense would be cool, but I don't think you'd want to read it for a whole book.
No. And the other side of Abaddon's stories, we get, as we say, we get that these callbacks for Abaddon's.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So he's leading a fleet.
Yeah. And
he's sort of shackled with Zardu Layak, the word bearer, that he's not really very keen on. And his interactions with Layak trigger memories of his youth. And by youth, I mean his pre-Space Marine youth back on Chthoniya, and then his sort of early days integrating into the Legion, which is really cool. And it's nice to see a bit of Abaddon not just as this sort of choleric, angry, ranty figure, someone who is sort of rounded. And I think I was watching John's interviews on Warhammer TV. I think John makes a good point that Abaddon, the size of Abaddon we're seeing in this book, are starting to illustrate a little bit about why he ended up how he ended up in things like Aaron's series. It's not an answer, but you get a little hint of that.
Oh, definitely. And Abaddon's, I think part of the problem is he's almost always been there with other major characters.
Yeah.
So he's been the foil in certain parts for Loken, or Horus has been around, or whoever. And the characters probably had to be that slightly caricatured version that we've seen, and never had that space to be a huge amount more. It possibly could have, but has ended up in that role. 4 or 5 times over the.
I mean, we haven't had an Abaddon book.
No,
in the Heresy. You could argue that Loken has had essentially, or maybe not actually books to himself, but he's had a lot of time. Quite a lot of other characters had. People like Ahriman have actually had loads of attention in the Heresy. Abaddon really hasn't, and this is not a book about him, but there's some good chunks. It's him in some situations that we've not seen him before, including, balls to the wall fighting.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool, but also really reflective moments.
I think that's the key.
Really quite somber moments.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's having that time to see his viewpoint. We've had his view. We've had other people's viewpoint of what he's saying.
Yeah.
But that was a really good aspect, and really, actually, I don't know. Like, I'm not a book critic. I'm a fan, and I can give my opinion. But I felt it broke the book up in the right ways. It was pacing, maybe, I suppose. I felt that worked really well as well, because we have got this Sadie Ollerton story which gets frantic. And we have this this mega, mind-blowingly huge space battles going on, where Perturabo, who planned it all, must have been in his element, and however many, oh no, we've lost another 50 ships. It's like, oh yeah, well, that's perfectly fine. That is way under the amount we expected to lose at this very point in the battle. All that kind of stuff, and in it, you get this introspective Abaddon bit coming in that reminds you again, actually, not only the bad guys aren't stupid, they aren't all in it for their own personal reasons, and actually here we got the guy who's been put down as the angriest of all the bad guys almost actually is biding his time, is working the plan.
Yeah, and his, it's not like you get his opinions on the plan, but you get a sense, or I got a sense of this, that Abaddon and Ahriman and a few of the other characters, they're sold on this. They're engaged. They can't back out. They can't change things. So they're knuckling down and going, this is what I have to do. But they're not necessarily as really, they're not necessarily that comfortable with exactly what's happening. They want the end goal, but the choices that Horus has made about the price he's willing to pay, they're not always necessarily that comfortable with.
No,
you have someone like Sardu Layak, who's really a cipher, who is this very difficult to interpret character, but who on the surface at least is, he's on board, like he's pushing for this, he's involved, and the same with some of the other word bearers. But then you have Ahriman or Abaddon, clearly, really intellectuals, which is what we never saw that before the heresy of Space Marines being like that. But these really were amazing human beings to an extent. And so they know full well what's going on and what they're sort of sacrificing and what they're potentially losing. But they all have their objectives. They all have their own personal goals as well as Horus's goals.
It's like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I feel it's like that football team, that sports team where so in the UK, Man United, when they were flying high, I think Andrew Cole and Teddy Sheringham, like, they never spoke to each other, apparently.
Really?
Something happened really early on, and neither will talk about it, as far as I'm aware. Someone might know more of the story. They don't mention it. Like, we just don't get on. We don't like each other to the camera, whatever. Apparently they hated each other. But the captain came in and goes, I don't care what's going on between you. Yeah. Right? Just as long as you go out there and perform, that's all that matters. And you can feel that tension in here. That, they're not sure around each other a lot of the time. They're not 100% sure the plan's really like the right thing, but that's, we're going to get on with it because we're in this together. Yeah.
And they are, these are determined characters, and I think John's really digging into them. And because it's not all just fighting, so for example, Abaddon, you do see him, in the thick of it, and that's really cool. But that's probably the minority of his arc in this story. The majority, as you say, is him sort of musing over things and quite thoughtful. And so John's got a lot of time and space to really dig into, like, what's he going to be thinking at this point as he's making his way through, as things are happening and he's getting closer to his end goal in terms of what Horus has asked him to do. What's he going to be thinking? He's not a servitor, he's not some robot. He's going to have opinions on this.
Yeah.
And because it is paced in such a way that it isn't all, action and breathlessness. I think it gave John the chance to explore those things, and what that means in context of the book is that you've got contrast and dynamics. So when it's quiet, the quiet parts have real impact because it then flips to something that's completely crazy, crazy ship battles and all this sort of stuff, or really horrific things happening. The sense of scale, the sense of sort of loss is really eye-watering. That then flicks back to a very personal scene, and so you're getting that contrast rather than it always being just about inside their heads, which would probably be boring, or just the big picture of ships exploding, which would just get tedious in a different way.
Yeah, and having the three different stories, completely different kind of things going on helps balance that out as well.
Exactly.
And then in amongst that, we also get those little snippets of the fact that it's not just a physical realm we've got. And I don't want to go into too much in there, but they're there underlying every moment as well.
I think that's really valuable to mention that, I guess people might be like, well, hang on a minute. Is the whole series just going to be about, the traitors going from A to B, and if they can't break down the walls, then it's game over? And again, if you watch any of John's interviews or listen to them, he talks about this idea of it being a war fought on multiple planes, and in simple terms, it's the physical and the warp, and so you have those sort of two strands going through it. That I agree. I don't think it's worth talking too much because you don't want to give spoilers away. But it's really emphasising this idea that there's a reason why Horus has had to go for Terra.
Yeah,
or he's been pushed to go for Terra, and there are some implications of that sort of become clear throughout the book, and are hammered home in multiple ways during the book, and I think will be followed through in the rest of the series. That's certainly the impression I got. And having talked to John, I think there's an element of him. He's set he's given the rest of the authors a sort of a toolkit on how to talk about these sort of things and how to show them, which then suggests to me that we're going to see more of that in future. And this idea of Horus and the Emperor, they know what's got to happen.
Yeah.
But they might not be in it that much. Horus, I don't think this is a spoiler to say that Horus is not really in the Solar War, the book. He is in it, but he's not a major player in person. He's there more in sort of spirit. But when he is there, he has that presence, and it's because it's not all about boots on the ground.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case for all 8 books.
I agree.
And I think it's better that way. And the same for the Emperor. These two guys are going to be held back, and we're going to be, it's only going to whet our appetite for it more, I think. Well, I hope that's the kind of the way it goes. You don't mind seeing them every now and then, but this isn't their fight yet.
No.
So it will be really interesting to see where we go from here. I don't really. Part of me was like, oh, we got to this point by the end of the book. Okay, we've got 7 more books. And that doesn't mean there aren't stories to tell that still involve, it doesn't mean that we're going to go in a direct linear path.
No,
you can jump around a little bit, but I was quite like, wow, there's quite a lot of storytelling to come.
Yeah, I mean, stuff happens in this.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of stuff happens, and it leaves. I think John's been quite open. Certainly, I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it here. I think John's been quite open though about where this book leaves off, and really what it's trying to do, which is this is the main depiction of the Solar War, the space battles. But let's say, in simple terms, once they reach Terra, the traitors are on Terra, but that doesn't mean, excuse me, that the war in space is finished. It doesn't mean that there's nothing else to do. So,
I think Mars is the big one for me.
Mars has definitely got to be tackled. But I think the thing that's worth remembering is if you read the Solar War and you think, that was great, but I wish there'd been more of this, there probably will be. Yeah,
absolutely. It was just one of those things I didn't really think about until the end of the book almost. I was like, we got 7 more books.
Well, I think that's testament to how good the book is, that you're reading away, going, this is amazing. Personally, I actually thought it started off quite slowly because John had quite a lot of arcs, quite a lot of things to introduce. But after a while, when I felt that it sort of kicked in, it was always interesting. But then when the pace picked up a bit, and it all came together, I was thinking, this is just brilliant. And you're just reading away, and then it finishes, and you think, what? Where's the next bit? And that is a testament to a really good book. And if you think about all the character arcs, we've talked about a few, but there's so many other characters you could name that have been in other books. Boreas. We've not talked about Dawn, Malkador, some of the other Thousand Sons. There's Jubal Khan. There's so many characters who've all had their arcs that John's had to bring them together, combine them, give us a story that isn't just about. So for this chapter, we're going to talk about what Jubal Khan's up to, and then we're going to move on to the next chapter, which talks about what Abaddon's up to. It's interlinked, intertwined. It's a single narrative that tells all of these things while being explosive, while being characterful and in-depth and personal, while introducing new characters that we've not seen before, while doing all of these things, and you get to the end and you still have that visceral sense of, what? When's the next book coming? That's testament to a really good novel, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we pretty much kind of covered it, but there were some set pieces in here as well. Sigismund's, if you're a fan of Sigismund, I think you're going to love his story. The White Scars, right early on, there's a White Scars ship. That whole aspect was brilliant. And that had me kind of thinking, okay, I came into this book not with any expectations per se, but I think naturally we all expect certain things, even if we don't think about it. And I was like, what's going to happen? To a lot of different people. There's a lot of characters involved in this story, and in reality, there's only a handful really that we know go past the fate of Terra. So who's okay, who's not okay? That kind of thing. So,
and people are going to die. That's obvious, but really think about it. People that you like, characters you're fond of, are going to die, and they're not all going to die in glorious blaze of glory sort of ways. Some of them are going to die in disappointing is not the right word. In ways that they would have hoped not to go out.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that we've seen that in the Solar War, but what I think the Solar War does is remind us that there are many, many, many characters, and they can't all have their glorious walking off into the sunshine, or their sort of glorious death. Yeah, I mean, it's brutal. I got this sense that this sort of tone of, actually, this is going to be heartrending. This is going to be unpleasant at times. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The set pieces were totally spectacular. Dawn gets his moment in the sunlight. I actually think John sort of has a bit of a reputation of being good to the fists. And I guess this carries that on. While he's not in it that much, it kind of is a book about Dawn, because everything that's happening is happening as a direct result of things that Dawn put into place, or arguably things that which he was unable to anticipate. But his presence is there, and then when he is in shot, there's some cool stuff with him back on Terra, and you're seeing that through the eyes of Suka Sen. So you're getting that classic heresy thing of seeing Space Marines and Primarchs going through hell, through the eyes of a mortal, of human. So some cool stuff. We haven't even mentioned Loken. He's in it.
Yeah.
He's tied in fundamentally with Mercedes Ollerton. Narratively is really because of what happened in the opening trilogy. He's not got a huge presence in the book, but he's definitely there, and I think there's more for him, more implications of Loken yet to come. Yeah. It's one of those books that, on the one hand, we could talk about it for 2 hours and not exhaust things to talk about, but on the other hand, it's really hard to say much and really say what you want to say without giving terrible spoilers away. So I think we've covered it in a bit of a roundabout way, but I think we've probably certainly got close to the end of what we realistically can say without winding someone up and going, I didn't want to know that.
Absolutely. I will. I agree on the John thing. He gets a lot of interesting comments from a lot of different angles, partly because he challenges things, but also I think with Praetorian of Dawn as well, he does show the best light of Rogel Dawn. I think Rogel Dawn hasn't had his best light shone for most of the Heresy books, so I haven't got a problem with that. But also, even though Dawn's best light's shining, there are still people who are his equal, or maybe even better, who are challenging him. So it's not like he's getting his own way all the time. So that's my take on that. Just thought I'd put it out there. But
I think that's really interesting, and we can go slightly off topic here. I think what qualifies a character like a Primarch sort of having their moment in the spotlight? Is it that they get to shine emotionally and they just get some cool moments and all that sort of stuff, or is it that they kick ass and always win? And I think that, you talked about whether you're more about less fighting. I'm grossly generalizing here, but I get the sense that those fans who justifiably like their fighting, that sort of person is going to say, well, for me, I love Rogel Dawn, and so I want him to win. I want everything to work out fine for him, and I want this story to show me that he is cool and kick-ass and better than anyone else. But then someone else might be a Perturabo fan and say, well, I want that to happen to Perturabo. Yeah. And there's not always that much room for acknowledging that someone can have their moment in the spotlight and really, the author can really get across who that character is, and they can still be on the back foot. They can still be quote unquote losing. And what John does, in my opinion, is really go down the route of character first. Yeah. So, the loyalists are getting annihilated. They know this. They know this is going to happen. They can't come through this unscathed. They can't come through this anywhere approaching unscathed. They just have to weather it as much as they can. And that applies to Dawn as much as it does to Sigismund and that lot out on the front lines. So you can't go into the Siege of Terror thinking any of the loyalist Primarchs are going to come out really smelling of roses. No. Then they're not going to come out and you're going, you know what? Dawn had this. He's handled it. He's clearly the best. That's not what this is about, because that's not what real life would be like. And I know talking about real life in terms of, Space Marines and Primarchs, but nevertheless. So what you get out of something like the Solar War is that sense that, Dawn is flawed. He's not going to get it all right. But when it really boils down to things, he is the man you want to grit his teeth, to stand his ground, and to say, no, this isn't going to happen. This is, I am making this happen the way I want it to happen. Yeah.
I also wonder if there's
that sort of thing you get.
Yeah, I also wonder if there's a little bit of a cultural thing in, I'm British. I love sports, which means I am kind of all through the 90s and everything else. The archetypical sporting British hero was the guy who never gave up, even if he didn't win. So
yeah, that's interesting.
And performed. And when you look at certain aspects of this, I think there's a definite appreciation of you don't have to win. What you have to do is perform and effort and everything else, and never give up and all that jazz. And that is enough sometimes to make someone some of our greatest sports stars. didn't win a lot for a period of time. In the 90s, it's relatively recently that we've actually been able to say over a number of sports, yes, we got world champions in this. Tim Henman's a great example in tennis. He was, he was a sporting hero who, I hate to say he never won anything. He was in the top 10 tennis players for years. I'd love to have a career like that, but he never achieved that crowning glory of taking a major title.
No,
and was seen as this heroic loser.
No, I think that's a really good analogy. Sports as analogy for Primarchs, and I think you can arguably apply that to both sides in this sort of story. Obviously we know the traitors aren't going to win, but they're going to have some seriously good moments on their side. But I'm sure there are going to be traitor characters throughout that knuckle down and really grind it out and just don't quite manage to achieve what they wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
Just as much as you get the same thing from the loyalist characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's a good point.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, I think we probably should stop there before we carry on. What we might do is maybe when the next book comes out, we can come and revisit this one in more detail.
Yeah, that would be quite good fun.
We'll have to put a decent time limit on it. We'll work that out.
Yeah. Well, if anyone wants probably a more organised set of my thoughts, you can always go and check out my review on Track of Words. I've mentioned the interviews with John, so there's a bunch of stuff on Warhammer TV that's worth checking out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we've essentially been talking about this because we both bought the expensive limited edition. Depending on when you listen to this, the standard sort of hardback edition and I guess ebook and audiobook due out on the pre-order on the 11th of May. So that'll be soon or will have passed, depending on when you're listening. And then I guess I imagine it's going to have the usual Heresy release schedule. So about 3 months later, it'll come out in trade paperback, and then another 3 to 6 months, I don't remember the specifics, it'll come out, I hope, in mass market paperback. But the point is, we're talking about this now. If you're listening to this going, I can't buy it, you'll be able to get your hands on it soon.
Yeah, and if you're on the fence, I wouldn't hesitate in recommending you go and get this book.
Go get it. It's so good. I think we're sort of used to the normal, in quotes, normal Heresy hardbacks. They're lovely editions. You get those great illustrations inside. It's a nice physical thing. You get the wraparound cover. I think it's going to be basically the same format for this, just with a gold spine rather than a black spine. So it's going to look lovely. The ebook just as good. It'll be interesting to see who they get narrating the audiobook.
Yeah.
But it's whatever format you like. Okay, if you're waiting for the mass market paperbacks, it's going to be a while. But it's going to be a while anyway. For the rest of the mainline Heresy ones. So if you're being determined, which I power to you, because I couldn't do it. I wouldn't resist. I'd end up going and buying more. But yeah, you've got a load of stuff to look forward to if you're waiting for that. If you just want to buy it in any format, get that hardback, get that ebook. It won't be long. It will be totally worth it. And then hopefully, we won't have too long to wait before The Lost and the Damned launches. And
as we've said before, this is a great jumping in point. If the 54 books beforehand are too daunting, and the rough story, then I don't think you lose anything. You might not have a full appreciation of who X character is, but I think the book works without having. I think the Mercedes Ollerton's, the thingy story. That aspect of it. Yeah, a little, but
I agree. I think if you really can't face going through the whole series, it is completely worth reading the first trilogy.
Yeah,
I would say you'd be almost be silly to not do that. It's 3 books. It's not going to take the end. It's not the end of the world. If those are the only ones you read, you'll still love this. The more you've read, the more you'll get out of it. The more you'll see the lovely little links and the way John's rolled it together. But as you say, Greg, if someone wants to jump in at this, make sure you're aware of roughly what's happened for. there are things that you'll miss in terms of, real context and deep understanding of why the traitors are going after certain things.
Yeah.
Why certain characters make those choices. But it's a solid story, so you'll understand it, even if you might sit back and think, I feel like there's a wider implication to this. But you'll still understand what it means in terms of this particular narrative. So read as much as you can, but if you're desperate to crack on, just jump in. You can always go back and you can always think, I loved that bit on the what's name or with this character. Let's find out where that was previously, and I'll go and read that book. Because it's going to be a few years before the siege finishes, so there's going to be time to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, right. Well, we'll leave that there. And as I say, we will definitely return to this one.
Yeah, that was fun. I'm happy to talk about it again.
Awesome. Cheers, Mike.
Thank you.
And we've done it. We've made it to the end of another show. We're going to wrap this one up quickly. It's just me by myself. So again, I don't want to bore you guys too much. Just to remind you, Versatile Terrain have 25% off for the whole of May. So if you want some nameplates, go check them out. They do some other bits as well. So go and check out Versatile Terrain. Still got tickets for Dayland Prime. If you want to come and play some 30k in Cardiff at the end of August, I've just received the first tables sponsorship as well. So I'm going to be putting some pictures up online, hopefully over the weekend, of some really cool stuff for that. We got a few people coming in, helping out. Hopefully we're going to get some more stuff. Really looking forward to running that event down in Cardiff. Hopefully we're going to get a nice weather for it as well, and that makes the evening out in Cardiff rather wonderful, I feel. As usual, if you've got any feedback on the show whatsoever, you can email in greg@theimperialtruth.com or neil@theimperialtruth.com, and you can find us all on our social medias. All the links are in the show notes. Links are in there for Versatile Terrain, for the event, for Element Games. Loads of cool stuff going on there. If you need anything, you can go and find it. And just a reminder that if you're at Warhammer Fest, that Neil and I will be there. I'll be on the Saturday. Neil will be there on the Sunday. If you do see us, feel free to come and say hi. It's always good to meet up with people. And it'll be interesting to see what it's like this year as well. So yeah, even if you want to say feedback about it, things like that, feel free to send any of that kind of information in. It's more than welcome at the show. But I'm going to leave it as short and sweet as possibly I ever have. So until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.